Hi, my name is Anne McElhenney.
And I'm Phelim McAleer.
And welcome to the Anne and Phelim Scoop. And we are 6 3/4 months into the 2-week flatten the curve lockdown. And Ireland has gone from being a land of saints and scholars whose clergy and people were known across Europe as educators and leaders. And now
we're the only country, Ireland is the only country
in Europe
where you can't go to church.
You can't go to mass.
To go to mass.
You can't go to mass in Ireland. You can go to mass everywhere else in Europe, just not in Ireland. Including Italy. And it's interesting, just a tweet from a guy called Michael Kelly here on just amazing. In Italy, churches and restaurants have been open since May the 18th without major incident. The country has been open to international visitors since June the 1st without major incident. Dublin is the only city in Europe where it's forbidden to go to mass. But it's also forbidden.
Says we remain a hermit kingdom.
And we remain a hermit kingdom. And it's not the only thing you can't do in Dublin. So suddenly there's a new lockdown in Dublin. So thoughts go out to our friends in Dublin who are trying to cope with all of that.
Yes.
And as you all know, we've had this huge news since the last scoop that Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg died on Friday. With little more than 5 weeks to the election. This is a massive, massive news story. But Mary Kenny, people obviously, at this point, you've heard everything that needs to be said about Ruth Bader Ginsburg. But I actually thought Mary Kenny's tweet...
To explain who Mary Kenny is she was a radical feminist, actually, back in the 70s. Is now, I don't know if she would call herself conservative, but certainly has matured her views.
She'd call herself Catholic, I can tell you that for sure, which already kind of calls you something.
She's an international columnist, but she's based in London and Ireland.
She makes a really good point about the death of Ruth Ginsburg. And it's interesting. It's something no one else has said, and I just think it's just interesting to have something new to say about this event. So Ruth Ginsburg's death at 87, this is Mary Kenny saying this, is an astonishingly impressive tribute to American healthcare. She was first diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in 2009. 11 years survival is amazing with this form of cancer. On this side of the Atlantic, few people survive 2 years.
Yeah. I remember speaking to an oncologist when I heard about Ruth Bader Ginsburg's latest cancer, and I asked this oncologist, here's her medical background. Well, what's the story? And he goes, well, and he was based in the United Kingdom system, in the National Health Service. He says, normally when I am faced with a cancer, I can look at it and say, well, the last 10,000 people who've had this survived.
For this length of time.
20% survived this, 40%, and you've got this chance and that chance. He says the number of people who have survived her cancers are minuscule, and it's because a lot of it, maybe it's genetic, but a lot of it is due to the amazing American healthcare service. It was, you noticed it too, or rather the really bad healthcare service, nationalised healthcare service, the Lockerbie bomber.
Oh God, yeah, I remember this.
He was released early from Scottish prisons because he had fatal cancer. Terminal cancer, and he had under the Scottish system.
Oh yeah, it was a compassionate thing. He was let out to die.
Because he was going to die.
Going to go home to die.
Of course, he survived for years because he went to Libya and got the world's best medical treatment paid for by Colonel Gaddafi, and survived for years and years. And everyone said, "Oh, it's political. Oh, it's this and it's that and the other." No, he was given treatment. There's treatment rationing in Scotland. You're not allowed to get certain expensive treatments. He went there and got all the expensive treatment.
Because Colonel Gaddafi was paying and he had deep pockets. Yes. Okay, Phil, talking about deep pockets and things like that, what else are we talking about today?
Of course, Obamagate the Movie is well underway. We're working hard at it. I want to update you on it. Don't forget, you can go to obamagatemovie.com to donate. But we'll be talking to Brian. I'll be talking to Brian Godawa, my co-writer, about the film later on.
Yeah, and tell us about Josh. You have a story about Josh Fox.
Yes, God bless him. Josh Fox. He brought you Gasland. He started the anti-fracking movement. But does Josh Fox really believe fracking is bad for the environment, or is he a grifter? A hard leftist wonders about this, which is very interesting. This attack's coming from the left. We will help him fill in the gaps in his knowledge.
And we have a big story from California, breaking news story from California this week about the unemployment benefit that has come a little bit unstuck during the COVID. And actually, as I say this, Film, I realised that while you continue to talk through the rest of the teasers. I will run off because
I
forgot the visual. There's a visual.
There's an actual visual.
There's a helpful visual here, but I'm going to run and get that.
Okay.
And we have an interview with Marjorie Dannefelser, the president of Susan B. Anthony List, about her new book, Life is Winning. And Phelim is on the patio as well in this show, making a perfect dessert you cannot miss. But I'm going to let Phelim start talking about Obamagate while I go and get the visual for that subsequent story. Off you go there, Phelim.
Wonderful production values here. So what is Obamagate? So it's the Obamagate movie. It's starring Dean Cain, Christy Swanson, John James. It's coming out at the end of the month or the beginning of the next month, and Anne is back. It's telling the truth about the investigation into the candidate Trump and then President Trump, the fake Russia story. And the reason we are having to do Obamagate the Movie, which you can donate to by obamagatemovie.com.
Don't worry, we'll keep on mentioning that if you didn't write it down the first time.
Because the media are not doing their job. As you may know, Peter Strzok has a book. Peter Strzok, one of the FBI lovebirds, he was a senior FBI agent. He, together with other agents, he investigated Trump. He was having an affair with Lisa Page, and they tweeted conspiracy texts back and forth to beat the band. And he's now got a book out justifying what he did.
Can I interrupt and say that this reminds me, I remember seeing a thing on television years ago, and they said, and excuse me if this sounds a bit naughty, but the thing was how to become a virgin. Do you remember this? That how you could become a virgin was, if you weren't a virgin, was get on television, go public. So there's two examples of this, and obviously we're using virgin in a metaphorical sense here. Governor Cuomo of New York has a most shameful past in terms of COVID. Like, it is disgraceful what he did. And yet, here he is. He's written a book. Peter Strzok has the most shameful record at the FBI, recent record of the FBI of what he did during the Obama administration. It's shocking. It is disgraceful. And guess what he does? He comes out with a book, and it's kind of a way, I think, of going super public, of cleaning yourself somehow, right?
See, it's helped, assisted by. See, it's not shameful.
Oh no, you're right. It's
not shameful,
yes.
Right? If it isn't in the newspaper, if it isn't on the websites. So the media did their best to cover this up, right?
Yes.
And if it's not reported, it didn't happen. So it's easier for him to become a virgin again because he was never deflowered in the first place.
Oh, boom, boom! Look at you going on with that metaphor. Love it, Phil.
Yes. So the media are not doing their job. And all these interviews with Peter Strzok.
Everyone interviewed him.
Yeah, they keep repeating this canard, this cliche that the investigation by the Inspector General found there was no political violence.
Totally cleared.
They found there was no political bias behind the Trump investigations, and they always quote that. This is wrong. In fact, it's not just wrong, it's a lie because these journalists know better, and they must know better. They're smart. What the Inspector General actually found was no documentary or testimonial evidence of such bias, right? But they found no documentary or testimonial evidence to explain actions, right, for which, quote, no satisfactory explanations were offered.
Right.
So there were actions taken that could not be explained.
Yeah.
That led you to believe it was bias. But to be fair, there's no documentary or testimonial evidence that it was bias. But in the absence of all other explanations, it has to be bias. That's what you could say. But this idea that they found no bias is wrong. They actually did find bias, but he just didn't find evidence. He found inexplicable things that they did that were anti-Trump and wanted to undermine his candidacy. But they were smart enough not to write down about it, or talk about it, or confess to it. So, in other words, so then you have these Peter Strzok interviews, and it's just he's everywhere. But like softball interview after softball interview. One of my favorite recent one is Anne Applebaum of the Atlantic magazine, and she's kind enough to printed it out in full, and it's like a joke.
And yet you yourself were used by the FBI and the Department of Justice as a scapegoat. You have said that the release of your personal text was not just unlawful, but deliberate. That implies that there was some politics behind that decision.
And Strzok, look, I think it was illegal. I'm suing the FBI and DOJ right now. It absolutely was political. I think there is within the DOJ and the FBI the motivation not to get on the wrong side of a vengeful president.
What does it feel like to have your personal life made public? To have private messages suddenly become the topic of a national political debate?
It's been horrible. I know my actions played a part in that. Still, it's been horrible, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone. I mean, complete nonsense.
Can I just give you a little bit of advice there, Peter Strzok? And I'm sure, because you're very smart. You're very smart. You wouldn't be the head of counterintelligence at the FBI for a period of time if you weren't really, really smart, right, Philip?
Okay.
And yet, you used your work phone to say all these things. You used your work phone. I mean, you have a private phone, right? You have like a private phone where you write to your kids, right?
Yeah, but his wife would have access to that.
Oh, and then the complicating factor that you're having an affair. Ah, yes, indeed.
So, I mean, I just want to go back to Anne Applebaum, right? You know, what is it like to have your personal life made public, to have private messages suddenly become the topic of a national political debate? They weren't private. In fact, to my everlasting frustration with the Obamagate movie and the script of it, they have not published the really private messages between Strzok and Page. Now that would be a script, right? You know, all we have is we have private messages.
By the way, we have a lot of very good stuff.
We have a lot of good stuff, right?
But it does tantalize you that there is lots of stuff that we didn't get to look at.
You know, what we have is private stuff that reflects on their political maneuvering as well. But so the public, the messages that they have published are all related. And, you know, this thing where they talk about anti-Trump messages. They are not anti-Trump messages. They are conspiratorial messages. They are messages colluding in the undermining of the Trump campaign.
He's not going to become president, is he?
Yeah, that's what Lisa Page says. He's not going to become president. And Strzok says to her, no, we will stop it.
We will stop it. What do you think that sounds like for an FBI agent who's meant to be impartial?
And who's actually investigating the president at that very moment, right?
I think we should go...
So, we should go over now to Brian Godawa. I spoke to him earlier about the process of writing the Obamagate script and the process of writing with me. Okay, so I'm delighted to be joined by Brian Godawa, my co-writer on Obamagate. Brian has been interviewed on the show before. He's a new type of author, as I said before, an inspirational author. He writes biblical fiction. Normally, he writes biblical fiction books, and he fictionalizes them in an interesting and dramatic way, almost like movies. And there's no coincidence, because you are also a screenwriter. You were the writer of To End All Wars, the movie that starred Keifer Sunderland and other movies. But you came on board to Obamagate to help me tell this story in an entertaining and dramatic way. I mean, welcome to the show, Brian.
Thanks for having me.
Yes. So, apart from the large sums of money and coffee that I fed you, why did you want to get involved in this Obamagate project?
Well, I've always been fan of yours and Anne's work ever since Mind Your Own Business, I think it was, and you and I kept in touch over the years, and we've always been talking about, I want to work with you guys as soon as you have opportunity, etc. And, you came to me and when you'd already done the FBI Lovebirds, and then in the last year, all this new stuff had happened, new information about Lisa Page, Peter Strzok, and more emails came out that the Obamagate is based on. And you wanted to sort of like give another fresh set of eyes, from another writer to help sort of catch things you may not have caught or whatever, just bring a new approach to it. But also you wanted to add other characters into it. And so I thought that was just fantastic, because I love the original play. It was hilarious. It was just their texts, but it was so fascinating. It kept me riveted. But now with all the new advancements, I thought it would be exciting to be able to add some from other key players, whether it's James Comey or Brennan, and that would help expand it. But it's just the Obamagate conspiracy itself is the biggest political conspiracy in history. It's phenomenally just criminal, and I thought just the opportunity to be a part, to work with you on one of your projects, and of all of them, this was just something I couldn't turn down.
It's also phenomenally entertaining, phenomenally dramatic. I mean, it's such a wonderful story, and even though it's an awful story, it's a classic Hollywood story. You have this love affair, you have Russia, you have China, you have the president of the United States of America, you have the FBI and the CIA, and you have, it's like these classic movies where the agent is out in the field, or the guy is out in the field thinking his best friend back in the FBI headquarters is looking after him, and turns out he's the one that's been betraying him all along. And this is, there's a lot of talk in the media about Peter Strzok's anti-Trump texts. We know they weren't anti-Trump. They were anti-Trump texts, but they were much more. They were part of a conspiracy. Trump's not going to win, is he? Right? And he goes, no, we will stop it. This is the most senior counter-espionage agent in the FBI saying we're going to stop him getting elected. This is the guy swearing to the FISA court that they had good reasons to open investigations into candidate Trump. So it's a great story also.
I agree with you. And in fact, I should have said that first, because really I was drawn to it by the entertainment aspect of it. Yeah. I don't want to just do political crap, because that's not who I am. I'm an artist. I love drama, human, the human nature and all that kind of stuff. And that's what this play had. And like you mentioned, there's nuance, there's subtlety, there's all kinds of interplay going on, the adulterous affairs beneath it all. But also, like you said, it's power plays in Washington, and all this subtext going on that it's actually quite a interesting, dramatic story to tell. But you also have what I love so much is the verbatim aspect. That is, these are all literal texts or literal quotes and tweets, and that's another. By the way, that's another element that I helped to bring in on this new pass, which is. Since this all began to happen, key players, whether it's Comey, Brennan, even Lisa Page, they all had Twitter accounts, and they were tweeting, and they had some very interesting tweets. Yes. And so we went through them, and we literally took all the tweets, that we could, that were still available from the last few years. We found all the best tweets that would also be revealing of the character of who these people really are as they're trying to cover it up. And it's hilarious. Especially one of my favorite characters is Brennan, because he's like, if you read his tweets, they are so hilarious, because he's this grumpy old man who's angry at the fact that he knows he's getting caught, he's being revealed, and so he's trying to cover up by expressing these extreme lines like what does he say? There's one that he goes, Donald Trump's press conference performance rises and exceeds the threshold of high crimes and misdemeanors. It was nothing short of treasonous. I actually found these hilarious now that we know the context of what really happened.
Yeah, I mean, that's either someone going crazy, shouting at clouds, or someone going crazy because they know that their crimes and misdemeanors are going to be exposed. That's good. People need to realize that this movie, the Obamagate movie, which, by the way, you can still help fund. As we're recording this, we are just under 50% funded. I am sure by the time you're watching this, we will be over 50% funded. But please, that's still 50% of the way. So please go to obamagatemovie.com. But you got to remember, this is all verbatim. Everything that you'll see on the screen during the Obamagate movie is something somebody somewhere said, or wrote in a memo, or wrote in a text or a tweet. Often between lovers, sometimes between FBI colleagues. They never thought Hillary was going to win, and they never thought these were going to be revealed. This is the thing people have to remember. Hillary was going to win, right? It was going to be a blue wave. They were going to own the House. They were going to own the Senate. There was going to be no investigations. This was all going to be swept away. And then Trump messed it all up by winning. So what did you think of the verbatim aspect of it? This is unusual, where you were restricted by. Normally, as a dramatist, you can invent characters and invent dialogue. Although To End All Wars was based on a true story, isn't that correct?
Yeah, it was. But being based on it is very different from literally using verbatim. It's a challenge. But you know what? What I loved about it, what I always I've always loved this. You've done this many times before. I think it's a brilliant approach, especially when you're dealing with politically hot topics, because it makes it harder to critique, to hate if you're doing verbatim, right? But there's something about knowing that this is really what they said rather than what did the writers change to make it fit their paradigm, right? Now, look, there is some editing that we did. Obviously, they had thousands of emails, and we focused on the ones that were focused on the storyline. So we had to do that. But also, there are a lot of, when you're doing text, you're doing abbreviations, you're making references like the DD, which actually means deputy director, or I talked with Jim. Well, that's James Comey. And so the only thing we did was we would spell out some names like James Comey instead of Jim, so that as people are watching, they'll understand who they're talking about, even though the writers understood with each other. But that just helps clarify what's being spoken about, because otherwise it could become confusing with all these acronyms and stuff like that. But really, that's the heart and soul of what we did as creatives, and just finding, the chief thing is finding that storyline. And there were so many emails, and it was truly fascinating. But yeah, so, you watch this and you go, wow, they really said this,
Yeah.
And it has that sense of authenticity. That's what I'm looking for, the authenticity, but then it also makes it even more humorous because, like we're talking about, so many things have come to light in this last year. When you originally were working on this project, it was in process, and it was still fascinating and enlightening. But now we've seen all the guilt has come out, the guilt of Comey, of Brennan, of Strzok, and the deliberation with which before it was, you were pointing at it through the texts, and it was subtle, but now we know it. So now when they say things like, when one of my favorite characters, I think James Comey and Brennan almost steal the show because their tweets are hilarious. So when you've got Jim Comey coming out there, and if you followed his tweets, he would come out there and try to speak like a Boy Scout who's trying to give calm, reassuring wisdom to the masses, and he'd be doing a picture of nature, and he said, so many questions, so many answers, and it's so self-righteous, and in context now, it's hilarious.
Yeah, there's an enormously funny aspect to everything that's there, and the humor comes right through it. Well, not the humor, just the absurdity of it.
Black humor, yeah.
Black humor. I mean, you had,
absurdity.
At one stage you have a Democratic congressman saying to Peter Strzok, "I believe you are the number one counter-espionage operative on the planet," and Peter Strzok goes, "Well, that's kind, he's." But at the same time, he's texting love notes and anti-Trump conspiracy notes to his mistress on their work phones. And it comes out even, and then in the middle of that, his wife somehow gets access to his work phone, right? Is able to open his FBI work phone, and then phones Lisa Page to confront her about having an affair with her husband. And it's like, this is like an English play, ooh, vicar, and suddenly, my trousers fell down. It's got that real element of farce and teen love and all that. It's a very, very funny play. So, if you want to help make this happen, go to ObamagateTheMovie.com. One last thing I wanted to ask you, Brian, was, what was it like working with such a great author as myself?
Well, I found it humbling, enlightening, truly, or well, let's put it this way. I'll put it in the words of Lisa Page: vomit, vomit, vomit.
Actually, you missed two other vomits.
Oh yeah, that's true. Vomit.
Vomit.
So, well, that's great to know, Brian. I'm trying to think of a phrase from the emails that I could respond to you with, but
all I can say is when you called me, it was sort of like, Brian, this is a good play, but I gotta get it up to Oscar quality writing, and so that's why I'm calling you. I remember those words that you spoke to me.
Yeah, I don't think in a world of verbatim dialogue, I'm not sure that's verbatim, Brian.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so I'm not calling you a liar, but I'm just suggesting there may be some differences between my memory of the verbatim dialogue and yours. So, Brian, thank you very much, and hopefully it's going to be coming out, hopefully the end of September, beginning of October. We're all looking forward to it, and the viewers of the Anna Film Scoop will be the first to know. Thanks, Brian.
Well, I think that's great. We were really lucky that Brian agreed to work with you, even though you're a vomit, very difficult to work with, apparently. God, I can't imagine why. That's shocking to me. But just for everyone to remember, I think what's really important for everyone to remember here is that we're now, what are we filming? We are about 5 weeks out from the election. I think it's really important that people realize that in that 5 weeks, Showtime are going to spend almost $100 million with their two-night dramatization of Jim Comey's book, The Comey Rule. You know, his self-aggrandizing book full of lies, full of making himself look like some kind of saint in all of this, in this complete debacle of what happened, this tyranny, actually, of what happened.
Yeah.
And they're basically going to do this, and don't forget the background of the Showtime show. Initially, it was going to come out after the election, and the actors went nuts and said they'd do no publicity unless it could affect the election. They had to have it to affect the election. So we think it's important that people see the actual truth of what happened. We're not making up the script. Yeah. We're only using their own words. This is verbatim. So if you think that's important, that the truth gets out before the election, then please give what you can to obamagatemovie.com. Obamagatemovie.com. Give whatever you can, anything. And by the way, just showing up and giving a $5 or $1 even really matters to us, because it shows that people understand how high the stakes are here, and how important it is that the truth comes out. So onward to an old friend of ours now, Josh Fox, who was the director-producer, on-screen talent of Gasland 1 and Gasland 2. He's in the news a little bit. Well, not really in the news.
So Jimmy Dore, he's a left-wing comedian, and he's not averse to calling out others on the left, and he's a quite funny guy. We saw
he's good. We saw him with this other thing.
And in fact, his niche seems to be calling out people on the left, or the liberal left, or the centre.
I think he likes to point out hypocrisy, which is always amusing, by the way.
So he has a show, a YouTube channel, the Jimmy Dore Show, and he has a look at Josh Fox. And so let's first of all remind you who Josh Fox is. Josh Fox brought you Gasland. He started the anti-fracking movement. He lied so much. He lied about his biography. He wasn't brought up in Pennsylvania. He was brought up in Manhattan. He lied about fracking giving people breast cancer. He lied about fracking polluting water. He tried to get our films removed from YouTube with bogus copyright claims. He tried to get Michael Moore's movie removed from YouTube. So, and then he had a play movie, The Truth Has Changed, where he devoted quite a bit of it to attacking yourself and myself there, Anne. God bless him.
Fabulous.
And we did, funny enough, we didn't try and get him closed down. In fact, I bought a ticket to the performance.
Look at you.
Right? Because I wanted to hear what he had to say. But that was part of the under the radar festival at the New York Public Theatre. And let's hear what the New York Times had to say about that. The Public Theatre, one of the nation's biggest and most influential non-profit theatres, has abruptly shortened the run of a climate change activist's provocative one-man show, saying the creator Josh Fox had violated the theatre's code of conduct. Fox claimed they were suppressing the content of the show, but according to the theatre, the truth, according to the New York Times, The Truth Has Changed was cancelled following multiple reports of Josh Fox's violation of our code of conduct, said a statement from the theatre. In a subsequent interview, the theatre spokesman, Shariza Bola, was more specific, saying it was a series of verbal abuses to the staff. So
bullying behaviour. Yes. Oh dear.
Yes. So let's hear what Jimmy Dore had to say about Josh Fox. I like the bit where he says, how he understood pretty quickly. The first time he met Fox, he understood him pretty quickly. Let's hear.
So in 2016, in Philadelphia, I met this guy, Josh Fox. He did that movie Gasland, right? It's about fracking. So he's super big about fracking. And, I could tell pretty quickly that he was a bit of a grifter, Josh Fox, and that he was more about his career and his self-promotion than he really was about anything else.
So yes, Mr. Dore said he could tell pretty quickly he was a bit of a grifter.
Grifter.
Yes. And into his own career. Listen, Sounds good to me. I wouldn't disagree with that. And then let's hear the second bit of what Mr. Dorr had to say about him.
By the way, he has a new show. I'll help promote it for him. It's called Staying Home with Josh Fox. Why would anybody name a show something that sounds like a punishment? Every so often, the guy who made films exposing the evils of fracking shames you for not voting for candidates who vow to protect fracking. The system's working great, folks. So this is the guy telling you to vote for Joe Biden. Joe Biden, the guy who promises to keep fracking going. His number one issue.
Yeah, so that's the context of that is that he's now saying don't support the Green Party, support the Democrats. And as Jimmy Dore says, this is a guy who made a film exposing the evil of fracking. Is shaming you into voting for someone who supports fracking, right? And Jimmy Dore can't work out whether he accuses of being a careerist trying to rise up to the Democratic Party and a grifter. But you see, there's also, let me help. I think I know Josh Fox better than Mr. Dore. He's not a careerist. Well, he is a careerist, actually. You're correct. But but one thing I think that comes out of all this is he knows fracking does not poison water, right? That's why he can do this. He made those documentaries, the Gasland documentaries, because he hates American fossil fuels. He hates modernity. He hates America. And he hates everything about modern America except for himself, and he's the perfect product of modern America. So look, because if fracking was poisoning water, right? There are over 1 million fracked wells in the United States.
We'd all be dead.
We'd all be dead. It's not scientifically hard to prove fracking poisons water, but if 1 million wells are poisoning the water of America, there is no other issue, right? I mean, he should be out there
lying down on the road
in front of vehicles. He should be, he shouldn't be doing plays. He shouldn't be doing anything. I mean, you're 1 million wells are. It's like these.
It's a little bit like. Do you remember when Van Jones?
That's right.
So Van Jones believed, signed a petition. So he's a very smart guy, Van Jones. I mean, he wouldn't be signing petitions that he didn't understand. So he signed a petition basically saying that 9/11 was an inside job, right?
Yeah.
Right. Fair enough. No problem. Right. Except for.
Well, I mean, he's entitled to his opinion.
He's totally entitled to do that. No, I'm saying no problem at all.
Yes.
Except for then, when he has the opportunity, wasn't he part of the administration for a while? He becomes part of the administration. Every second of his living, breathing moments when he was part of the administration should have been devoted to exposing this extraordinary thing that America had planned 9/11.
Or colluded in it.
Suddenly, though, he's in the administration. It's like not important at all. It's not true at all. So he didn't believe it. Of course he didn't believe it. If it was true, you wouldn't do anything else.
You do nothing else.
You do nothing else.
He was in the administration supporting solar panels and stuff. And it's like, who cares about solar panels? The American government have killed
murdered
3,000
of their own people. Of their own people. And it's like, and you're going to talk about solar panels right now? So it's kind of the same thing. So if Josh Fox for a second believed that the water was being poisoned, he would be living a different life than the life he's living. But
so just to sum it up for Mr. Dore, Josh Fox is a grifter, but he's actually an ideologue as well.
And a hypocrite.
And he's an ideologue. And he travels around the world. That was another thing. He travelled around the world
using lots and lots of fossil fuels.
Yes, complaining about fossil fuels. Remember, he used to boast, I've shown Gasland in 42 states or something. It's like, you didn't walk there,
Yeah.
So
in other news, are you one of those people across the United States of America who is receiving a mysterious EDD letter into your
what's EDD? Is that erectile?
So EDD is the Employment Development Department. So anyway, basically what's happened is scammers have been filing bogus claims using random addresses. So we went over to our very good friend Elizabeth on Saturday night, Elizabeth, who we'll talk about in another program, by the way, and Elizabeth unfortunately is leaving California. And Elizabeth showed us this visual.
That's those are all EDD.
All these letters are EDD letters to different names of different people. And this is only a few of them, Phelim. She told me she threw out loads. Oh no, she's got rid of tons of them. And so basically, these letters are written to her address. So all these different people to her address. Don't say the name.
These are employment benefit applications. So this is an application to get money from the government.
Unemployment money
So
from
there's
from the government.
over 70 of them.
Yeah.
So all with different names sent to her address. Somebody has been busy applying for them all.
And I don't know how they choose the addresses, but of course across the country there are people, and there's lots of reports of this in the media now, that some people got 75.
Well, I think California is the big one as well.
And California seems to be the big one. And actually it's very funny. I don't know if you saw, basically on Saturday night, so Ruth Bader Ginsburg died they announced the news on Friday. But on Saturday, Governor Newsom decided to publish his inquiry into what was happening with these unemployment benefits and publish it on Saturday night. And that's people are commenting on that. But basically,
the Saturday night news drop.
But basically, the big news here is that here in California this week they have shut down all new unemployment insurance claims because of the fact that this scamming thing is going on. But we just looked at a few of these. So basically, the EDD, which is the department devoted to paying out huge amounts of money to people, and some of these letters, by the way, have been opened, and I thought some of these were quite interesting, by the way, and just not to say the name here, but it's interesting, written to this one person, again, a made-up name, of course. Maximum benefit amount, $17,550.
Wow.
Weekly benefit amount, $450.
Wow.
Nice,
And there's 75 of them.
And hundreds of them in different houses. So people are getting tons of these, and checks are being sent out, or they're sending out these cards. They send out these like credit card, and what has happened is these scammers, they use your address, you get all of these, and if you're not like watching your letterbox, a lot of people have those independent letterboxes. The scammer comes around and goes into that letterbox and answers it and sends it back, and receives the payment. And in fact, another thing is happening where the letterbox is in the person's house. They've broken into people's houses. And they've also posed as EDD officers. And so the advice is, if anyone comes to your door and says they're an EDD officer, EDD never, ever, ever go to your door. So if somebody says they are, they're not. But it's a kind of an extraordinary story.
Crazy California.
Anyway, we're the next thing, we need to move on because we've got so much going on today in the show, as you already realised. But I spoke earlier to Marjorie Dannefelser, and actually I did this interview before the news of Ruth Bader Ginsburg's death was announced on Friday. And actually, you can imagine that. So Marjorie Dannefelser, who is the president of the Susan B. Anthony list, whose work is very much devoted to ending abortion forever in the United States of America, to overturning Roe v. Wade, to having senators and congresspeople elected and presidents elected who fulfill that anti-abortion agenda that is dear and near to her heart and to ours. So let's go to that interview now and listen to Marjorie, and it's just a wonderful interview. Great woman.
Obviously, it was, as you say, it was recorded just before the death was announced. It'll be interesting. We'll have her back on, I think, to discuss. But I think she's a little bit busy at the moment, Marjorie.
I think she's a bit busy at the moment, but let's go to that now. Marjorie Dannefelser is the president of the Susan B. Anthony list. Over the last 3 election cycles, SBA and their super PAC have reached more than 4.6 million voters by visiting voters in their homes to win a pro-life White House and secure a pro-life majority in the US Senate. I mean, amazing. She is the national co-chair of the Pro-Life Voices for Trump Coalition, a role she held during the 2016 campaign after securing 4 groundbreaking pro-life commitments from President Trump. And she is the author of a new book, Life is Winning: Inside the Fight for Unborn Children and Their Mothers. She is a mother of 5, and I am honored to say she is a very dear friend of mine. Welcome, Marjorie.
Oh, I love being on your show. I watch you all the time. So it's so fun to be in your room there with your bike and your hat.
The hat.
You get one of those hats.
The hat, the trick with the hat, Marjorie, is that you don't have to have your hair look great.
Well,
let's get on.
Don't worry about it. This is COVID hair.
So honestly, Marjorie, let me make a confession. So basically, this is my marks in the book. And we met recently at one of the launches of your books in North Carolina. And I got the book and you signed it very kindly. And I remember thinking, somewhere in my head, I thought, this is one of those books, that people write, who are the head of organizations. And really, someone in the back room wrote it, and it wasn't, And then I started reading it. I want to start this interview by just reading the first page, which is so you, and I just thought it was so powerful. I think it's really great for people, and I really want to recommend to people that they get this book. It's a testimony to courage and to perseverance in a horrible environment, is what I would say. Here's what Marjorie says at the beginning of the book. I am a convert. There was a time when I believed abortion was a good and moral choice. I argued that Roe v. Wade was the linchpin of women's rights. I came dangerously close to choosing abortion for myself. One of the benefits of being a convert is that I recognize the phenomenon in others. We share that. I have had the privilege of meeting thousands of pro-life converts. Some have been women who regret their own abortions. Many have been men who are profoundly ashamed of their failure to support both mother and child. My conversion was akin to what writer Madeleine L'Engle described as an intellectual acceptance of what my intuition had always known. Some people, however, experience a moment of clarity or a sudden encounter with the truth. Whatever the mechanisms, the process of conversion indelibly transforms one life. The Old Testament prophet Isaiah captures it perfectly, and I just love this. Remember not the events of the past, the things of long ago. Consider not. See, I am doing something new. Now it springs forth. Do you not perceive it? Well, I do. That's an incredible... Tell us about your conversion first, please.
Well, I think it's very, that beginning really is in many ways a thanks to my mother and father, who are still very, what they call pro-choice. But what they believe profoundly more than anything, that life was a constant search for what is true. And for me and my brothers, that was the gift that they gave us. And that took me far away, literally, and in terms of ideas and convictions from where they are. Now, I didn't give them all up because they have beautiful values otherwise. But that hunger that you have, Anne, as well, is what breathes newness into life when you encounter something beautiful that you had not known before. And I encountered it in other people. I found it in ideas and philosophy without question. I was at Duke and I was pre-med, smartest person on the planet, very political, knew better than everybody else did what politics ought to look like. And before you knew it, I chucked all that, was a philosophy major, met good people who lived what they believed, which was compelling, and also threw away these shallow bumper sticker philosophies like my body, my choice, because it just was unsatisfying. And I think that's the key. Unsatisfying isn't bad. In fact, part of us ought to be unsatisfied our entire lives until we're in eternity, because that's the only time that you're going to be completely satisfied. So my conversion was a process of dissatisfaction, unsatisfied, two different things maybe, but encountering the truth in people and ideas that just wouldn't let go. And when I fell big, like you, the difference between then, the minutes before and the minutes after were enormous, but I still fought it. And I have the feeling, I don't have a feeling, I have a knowledge that same, I'm never going to be that person doing those things in that place surrounded by those people. Like, that's how limited I was. And I did every single thing I said I wasn't going to do, just about, right? So in politics, it became very clear when I was the director of the pro-life caucus in the House that politics and a strong muscular flexing of that was missing at the heart of the pro-life movement. Tobacco farmers had it, but the babies didn't. And we have suffered a lot and lost a lot of people because lack of that muscle. I don't mean that nothing else good has been going on, because it has, but that's where we set about starting the Susan B. Anthony list.
And the book is called Life is Winning, and we're going to talk about that and about what Trump has done. But just before we get to that, I have such admiration for you, Marjorie, because I'm reading these stories. So your idea, Susan B. Anthony, was politics. You understood, you had politicians had to go out there and change legislation and had to fight for life. And what struck me, one of the things that struck me most about the book was how many times you've had your heart broken and your trust in people shattered. And like the stories are terrible and these are despicable people. I'm sorry, I'm going to say that. You don't have to say that. But I think these are despicable people who, for expediency, went from being, getting help from you, by the way, and getting resources from you, to throwing you under the bus over and over and over and over again. Can you speak to that? I mean, you have terrible stories in here. It's such I don't know how you stuck it and stomached it.
Yeah, I think because every single step along the way, even with big disappointments, I think with the right perspective and the right strategy, you can make a gain. For instance, when somebody truly disappoints you, somebody says, this is the death of a child intended for this world. No one can replace this child. They say that with great conviction and with great articulation when they're running for office. And then they act as if this is a dairy price support or tax deductions for office equipment, something to be negotiated away, something that is marginal at best. They deserve to be voted out of office. And I get great satisfaction out of that. In a, I hope it's a pure way. But it is exactly what it's supposed to be. It's, to me, when it is close to the amount of pleasure of helping elect somebody who's going to be that champion, but not close enough to be to be part of my psyche, I hope. But when you defeat somebody who has said this, and then there's a lesson for all the world that this is what happens when you say this is who you are, and then their next turn is to go into the private sector, and the public sector is not accessible to anymore. That is important. That is an important step forward within the context of where we're supposed to be. One thing I know you are, impatient. I am impatient for the result, and I'm impatient with in getting results. So a lot of those results are demi results. They're important in building through the process. And one thing that is a constant inspiration to me is the other successful human rights movements in America and how they found victory with a zigzag path that was relatively similar. And part of it is the extracting of punishments and praising the winner. So also so in one example, there was a senator who is all that pro-life senator, and we waited for months and months and months to say that he would take on the 20-week pain-capable bill. Okay, this guy's a hero. And his speech and what he says he's going to do, waited forever, never got to yes on him being the lead sponsor of the 20-week pain capable bill. The most modest thing back then, everyone was like, oh, this is too aggressive. This is like, no one will, we don't even know if it's constitutional. People, it's bizarre to think of now, but then that was the conversation among senators that are friends and people who are pro-life. And so we just never got to yes. So what do? We went to Senator Lindsey Graham and said, Senator, we need a strong lead sponsor of this bill. And he's like, absolutely. And I said, well, as a constitutional scholar, there's this little debate over here in the cloakroom about the constitutionality of this bill, right? He said, yeah, with the vote, the only important issue on the table is how are they going to vote, yes or no? This is on the table, and they're asked to vote yes or no on a 5-month limit. That's the only question that anybody has to resolve. And yes, I'll pick that up and I'll take it. It's that sense of not being bogged down in over analysis, weighing back and forth, and the idea that someone might object because it's unconstitutional is bizarre. If you know that this is a death of a precious one.
It's very interesting for me reading the book and just realizing the number of times you've had to deal with some, as I said, I think it's really despicable, very unprincipled behavior. People turning, after promising you things and then throwing you under the bus and not doing things and the number, the names there's so many of them. But it brings us on quite nicely to the fact that you know, as you say, and I'm quoting from the book, I never imagined a playboy real estate tycoon from New York City who was in the news the year SBA's lists launch for divorcing his wife and marrying his mistress, who 2 months before the wedding had given birth to his child. You never imagined that that would be your champion. And you know, when I look at the names that you mention in this book, like very pure kind of people, right? But who then did, I think, really despicable things. It's sort of interesting what happened with Trump. I mean, how bizarre.
If you didn't believe in God before, you know, it really is one of those stories. It's almost biblical that he was the last person on our list, literally. We fought him in South Carolina. We fought him in Iowa. Anybody, but any one of these 17 stars, you know, anyone but him. And I see now more what you're getting at when you say all these disappointments, all these, like my former boss,
yes,
you know,
yep.
And it gave me great pleasure to defeat him. He was this guy who taught me if you're gonna shoot a bear, you have to kill it.
Yes.
One of the best lessons I ever learned in politics.
And you shot him.
and he was defeated. So, but he was right. So look, you're looking at this playboy tycoon, and he's decided he's going to be pro-life. I'm like, right, okay. And so we go through this. I loved being wrong. It's the time I've loved being wrong most in my entire life. That he was incapable of being the person that he said he was going to be. But what I didn't know yet was that this is a guy not cast in the general and usual political mode. He's a guy who's really more like The Apprentice. Like, I'm going to set out to do this thing, and I'm going to do it. And this is not a moment of negotiations as backward and forward. I've got to be true to my word, or I'm not going to be able to be trusted in this deal. And I think more so in politics, he's been successful in that. So so when it came to the moment where it looked like he's going to be the guy, he is the guy, unless somebody came in and, I don't know, did some illegal thing and made themselves the nominee. We basically, in his sort of language, got up a contract basically and said, I'm happy pro-life coalition if you will put in writing these strong 4 commitments. And they were the court, Planned Parenthood, Pain Capable Bill, and the and taxpayer funding of abortion in strong language. He and Kellyanne read it. Kellyanne, so we've got people like Kellyanne coming on board, yes, and the Vice President Pence coming on board, makes these commitments. And so then we have a choice to make, like we all remember, and it was between Hillary Clinton and him. So in my house divided, it was a war. My children hated him like I had formerly, and I'm looking at a policy choice and our responsibility, and to either lead or not lead on the most important human rights battle in our nation. And so endorsing him and leading that coalition, as I still do, was the only choice. And I'll never forget the morning of that resolution, or the night before. And I was asked to go on NPR Morning Edition to talk about this, because nobody wanted to talk about it. Even the vice president was in hiding at that point, the vice president to be. And I just thought, this is, not going to receive it as a gift, but this interview is going to be a gift to my children. I want them to understand why this decision is being made, why I'm making this decision, and why it's the only choice that can be made in my assessment. And thank God, man, we were right. He turned out to be the only president the only president that has not only followed through on his promises, but has gone way beyond. In the general, he got stronger. He didn't get weaker after he won the primary. He got stronger. Even before the inauguration, we were meeting with him and the vice president and others to figure out, not meeting with him about the cabinet, I want to be truthful, with him and the vice president's team about who the pro-life slate looks like to be cabinet secretaries, undersecretaries, identifying all those positions where pro-life people need to be, and it happening in every case. It just was astounding. And I'm still astounded at how wrong I was and how happy I am.
It's interesting. One thing, and you have it in the book, and I remember, I don't know if we ever talked about that before, but so he behaves like a convert, and he's recognizable. because early on, and you'll remember, and you have this in the book, early on, when he literally, shortly after he converted and realized, the truth about abortion, he was asked by someone, I don't know the context, but he was asked, but what about the women? And he quite, quickly said, oh yeah, they should all be locked up, some version of that, or they should go to prison or whatever. What's really interesting, when we heard that, Phelim and I heard that, we were like, oh God, he's sincere. No, he's sincere because the jury in the Gosnell case were all chosen to not be pro-lifers, right? They were chosen to be pro-choicers or neutral. And when they heard the evidence and were asked afterwards, when they were asked, after sitting through that trial and realizing what Gosnell had done, realizing what abortion was, they said the women should be prosecuted. And we recognized in that moment that that's what happens when you are, and you say it in the book very well, that in that instant moment when you realize, oh my God, that's what abortion is. Your knee-jerk reaction is to think that the women are somehow at fault. For me, it actually proved how sincere he was. He wasn't being clever.
So in that moment, you realize, oh, yeah, that is, of course, then it's this level of horror. Of course it has. And think about other human rights violations that our country has experienced. If you experience the hosing down of Blacks in Selma, or you witness children in 12-hour workdays, and the bosses over them, or any manner of beatings of innocent people in the history of slavery, your immediate reaction is like, kill the bastards, get out of there. Mistreating those people, get them out of there. Your first and good and true pure instinct is stop it and never do it again. And the only way to keep you from doing that is to punish you. Now that's not where we are in the pro-life movement, but it is.
Yeah, but I think, and I think exactly as you say, I think it shows though that he was very sincere, and that he obviously, it's been a very, as they say, that horrible phrase, a teachable moment. I mean, he really has learned an awful lot and has come an awful long way. I want to go back to you though. You're a convert to Catholicism, which is a really it's a big deal actually. So you're the reverse of Mike Pence actually. So he left Catholicism and went to the evangelical church. You left the Episcopalian church and became a Catholic. By the way, I'm realizing you and I could talk for about 3 hours about all of this stuff. What have you thought of the Catholic Church's leadership on abortion?
Yeah, so speaking from the zeal of a convert, which I think Trump is on the abortion issue, like I still, even though it's been a lot of years, I still pray that I don't leave that behind. That spur that I originally thought was true is still true, but I understand the fullness of it even more. And therefore, it is a primary responsibility of the Catholic Church to meet this issue at the heart of the church in the beautiful ways that Mother Teresa and Pope John Paul spoke, to fail to speak up at this moment, which many are. And I mean, they think they are. That's the problem. They think they are, but they're not. I mean, there is a lot of beautiful communication on the part of a lot of bishops, but there's a lot of fear for going way out there on the limb. What they consider way out on the limb, the way out on the limb that it took to oppose all sorts of other crimes in our nation that eventually they did get around to, but there ought to be a conference right now. There ought to be where they're getting together, deciding what can we do to make sure that the election has a pro-life result.
And Joe Biden is calling himself a devout Catholic. Nancy Pelosi apparently is a devout Catholic. Go back a little bit. Governor Tom Ridge apparently was a devout Catholic from Erie, Pennsylvania, who became the governor of Pennsylvania on a pro-choice ticket. Should they be called out? I mean, what do you think? How is this possible that Joe Biden is a devout Catholic and yet has this?
Oh, there's some courageous bishops saying right now that you can't vote. You can't vote for a Democrat in this environment because, by definition, this is who they are. This is who they stand for. They don't stand for life. And in certainly the case, it's just so so evil as to think that the pure evil is active when a Biden says he's a devout Catholic and he has deconverted from being pro-life to being for making us pay for it. Not only is he good with it all happening up until birth, he also wants us to pay for it, be culpable in the act of killing a child intended for this world. That's evil. And that is the role of the church, is to preach the gospel and the goodness, and which includes the evil. So calling them out every time.
You know, I was super disappointed by the Catholic Church in Ireland when we had this recent referendum. Unfortunately, as you probably know, Ireland is the only country on the planet Earth that has voted, where the people voted for abortion. It's the only country. And we have, I mean, what an amazing distinction we have there. But the Catholic Church kept quiet. They did not take a leadership role, and I think we have abortion in Ireland because of that. Very, very disappointing. So it'll be interesting to see what they do here. But they are, I would say in the main, they're not making that much noise, the Catholic Church, so far.
I think that I really believe that will change, but the reason for reasons that I think it'll change if it's taken in hand, and I think it was taken in hand in our country with great effort. It has taken a while. The reason that life is winning in America is that it's been made at the highest levels a national conversation, and in our country, it has taken, and it still requires a national level conversation that the president continues, that it doesn't get buried among every other most important issue that ever was, right?
Yeah.
And the church, that has to it making it even more so a national level conversation. I think in Ireland, the bad guys got the upper hand because I believe there wasn't a true understanding of what was really happening in front of them, and now they do, and I hope there's a backlash.
You talk in the book beautifully about David de Leiden, and I really appreciated that. He's a major favorite of mine, and I've traveled on the road with him, and I just love how you talk about him, the man behind the videos that sparked a national conversation on late-term abortion. And you just, I mean, obviously he's a national treasure. It's incredible what he did. How do you think his work has impacted the pro-life movement?
Well, it's the same dynamic that I think I was trying to describe with all the other successful human rights movements. The abortion issue has a particularly difficult visual argument to make, meaning it's hard to make a visual argument, as in art and every other place. To see, to feel, to experience the horror is a deeply personal thing. Women have experienced this horror, and that's why women are polling, I think, more pro-life than men. But the public at large hasn't seen the beatings, hasn't seen the lynchings, hasn't seen the equivalent for the child. David's work at least described the horror, and through the words of people who were doing the work of cutting up the babies themselves, the haunting images of the Planned Parenthood and the middleman harvesting the parts of the baby, talking about, oh, this looks like they're twins, as she's putting them in the freezer. These are haunting moments that shouldn't be forgotten. And one of my favorite parts that I write about in the book is about he's going after Planned Parenthood, of course, because they're the primary culprit. And another one of those disappointing nights that I think led to a backlash was the night where we finally got a vote, a majority or a 51 vote goal in defunding Planned Parenthood, and we're there until midnight. Midnight passes. We don't know how John McCain, who we all ran as a pro-life presidential candidate long ago, what he's going to do. And we're waiting. The vice president comes over I think we have the votes. He's the president of the Senate. That's his role. So it's his job to be there in case there's a tie. He's all set to break the tie. All set. And moments later, like out of the blue, everyone thinks he's voting the right way. And he gives a thumbs up to Durbin and votes the wrong way. And now we are still funding. And so David was with us. I brought him there because I wanted him to see the moment that he had made possible by the passage of the bill to defund Planned Parenthood, finally. And then that. But, all of these things are not pure defeats. There's always a victory there. And the victory was the outrage. And nobody wants to be bless his soul, nobody wants to be that guy.
For me, I was so disappointed by Carly Fiorina. So when I remember meeting her the first time, and I was so impressed because here was somebody pro-life running, and she had been successful in California. And I thought, wow, that's incredible. You know, I just was really bowled over by it. And I know I've met supporters of her here, and I had to actually break the news to a big supporter of hers, a supporter of yours here in California, who didn't know what had recently happened. And just for everyone who maybe doesn't know, she has decided to support Joe Biden. And I just was reading an Atlantic interview she did. And in that interview, she says, "We're not making progress," she says. And in answer to this other question, they asked her, you know, Biden is a devout Catholic and he's struggled with his own position, but he's moved towards fewer restrictions, not more. And she says, "I think this is a great example of an opportunity to lead rather than just playing politics." He could do that. He could lead. He could problem solve. He could find common ground on a bipartisan basis. In other words, she completely doesn't answer the question. What was it like for you to discover that she has decided to work with Joe Biden and to help him become the president of the United States if that happens?
You know, it's interesting. I haven't told anybody this yet. Yeah, and I thank you for sending that to me today. I had not seen that. When this book was almost done, I sent it to her because we talk about her a lot in there as a hero that she was.
Yes.
And asked her to, you know, endorse it or whatever. Just also wanted, and it was just kind of a flat no. And I'm like, that is not, because I know her well and I've spent a lot of time with her, and that just seemed extremely odd. Like, wow, what's something missing? And the next thing I hear this happens. So I think she was extremely hurt by this president. She would resent me putting it like this, but she was extremely hurt and by this president. And she really tried to convince me to not get involved in this race, even at the general election point. And it was before we had endorsed, and just truly believed this was the most uncivil act that could be for this president to be, and didn't see it like every other person that I think has her convictions on this issue did, which is there was this choice between two policy sets. Which one are you going to choose? So now what do you do? What do you do when you see the Supreme Court tipping in our favor, Roe versus Wade coming unbound at the seams potentially within months, potentially, and you know that you've endorsed the other guy who will definitely not let that happen? What do you say to yourself? There is nothing that you can say. Everything that comes out of your mouth is going to sound ridiculous, which that is absurd, what she said. The idea, it's an opportunity. Well, yeah, it's an opportunity for Kermit Gosnell to come out and work at a crisis pregnancy center also. But I doubt that's going to happen. And I know that this will not happen with Biden and Kamala. I mean, it's just absurd. And when something is that absurd, you come up with crap like that.
It's very disappointing, and I know this guy who's a supporter of yours, a big supporter of ours, like he was devastated. You know, he considered himself a friend of hers, and you know, I was the one who broke the news to her. I thought everyone knew about it. It's funny, it probably hasn't gotten as much press as maybe she had hoped. But yeah, it's so disappointing. I mean, that's why I say this book is, you know, it's a testament to courage and tenacity and, you know, and stick-at-itness. But I think the stakes are so high, as you and I both know. The stakes are so high, and you know, at the center of this is a baby who can't speak for himself or herself, and who is the victim of the most appalling violence that is imaginable. Just so many people just don't seem to know that.
Do in many ways because of you and David. Without you and David, we would not have had that Planned Parenthood vote. Without you, we would not have had the people that, when your movie came out, there were members of Congress that have not talked to me in years because every time they see me coming, they think I'm going to ask them to do something difficult. Yeah. And I can name some. What happened after your movie was they came up to me. I feel so guilty, in the words of one Congressman. I feel so guilty that I have not done anything about this in so many years. I just need to know what to do right now. And that's what people coming off the sidelines who've been sitting there forever, you know, and then with what the governor of, and then what you set in place, and then what David did, and then what the governor of Virginia did and the governor of New York did. It's making it's public notice that this is happening under your very eyes. Are you going to sit on the sidelines or are you not? That's why life is winning. It's because you can't avoid it anymore. You can't, it's right in front of you. And because it's been made a national conversation. And that's why those disappointments are devastating. Carly's devastating, my old boss is devastating, all these little setbacks, John McCain was devastating. But because life is winning, it's just part of the canvas. It's all paint on a canvas, and it's going to end up being something truly beautiful.
I totally agree with you, and I think it's actually right. I'm going to segue because we always ask people some other questions about themselves, to kind of share something about themselves that people mightn't know about you. So first of all, I learned something new about you today myself. On your Twitter bio, it says that you wish you had a dog.
Yes, this is for the benefit of my husband, who is not on Twitter. But every once in a while, somebody says, that's really weird that your wife says, one day I'm going to have one.
I want a dog, but instead of that, I've got 2 cats and a possum now. We've got a possum that's visiting all the time.
Cats and possums are kind of the same animal.
Yeah, they're nice though. And the possum is kind of wild, and he's outside, and he comes up at night, and he's just lovely. We ask all of our guests for their go-to recipe that they're famous for in their house. What do you cook, Marjorie?
It's such a joke because it is so lowbrow. It's meatloaf. That's all they want it. I cook it. It's actually really fantastic. It's just Italian breadcrumbs and ketchup and a little egg and some ground beef. And that's really all it is. And I think, and I say, well, don't tell people that's the favorite thing that I cook that you like, because so one night I dressed up to be the best meatloaf maker. I put curlers in my hair and was wearing a bathrobe and shoes. So that's the whole image that my family has carved out for me. And so I make a pretty mean meatloaf.
Well, actually, we may have to have a meatloaf cook-off in your house one of these days, Marjorie, because I'm quite famous for meatloaf in my house. And can I just tell you, when we did the Gosnell movie, we had rewards. We had these kind of unusual rewards. One of them was we said we'll bring you on a pub crawl in Dublin. And it cost $10,000. You had to get to Dublin yourself. You had to pay for your own hotel. A fabulous couple who I think you probably know as well from Oklahoma, dear friends of ours, took that up and have remained friends of ours to this day because they loved it. But I also offered a meatloaf for $3,000. Guess, and like 5 people bought it. One of whom was Mike Gallagher. Yeah, we're in the interview and he's saying whatever. I'm looking through the rewards. Oh, you make a meatloaf? Oh yeah, I'm going to buy that right now. And he was one of the people. He got the meatloaf for $3,000.
So you and I have the same relationship with meatloaf. This is something I would never have known before today. This is super important. All right, let's have a meatloaf off and we'll do it online.
I love it. That's a date. We're going to do this. Your people need to talk to my people. The next question I have is, what piece of art inspires you? And that could be a poem, it could be a piece of sculpture, it could be a movie, it could be anything.
I have the feeling that it's others as well. It's Rembrandt's Prodigal Son. It was a revolution that painting was to me. It's so riveting. It's the whole story of grace and redemption, forgiveness. It's just beautiful. The father is in light, kindness. The son, who's always been a good son, never did anything wrong, has always been supportive and helpful, standing behind him, grimacing, unhappy in the dark. And then the son, the prodigal son, on his knees, devastated, crying. Oh, I can hardly get through it.
Wow.
Looking for forgiveness. And my image is always too, like right before that, not long before it was, his father was standing at the end of the fence, singing, waiting for him to return one day, always waiting, always with faith and hope and love. And as soon as he comes back, he's just enveloped in his arms and welcomed and celebrated. To me, that is the story of the beautiful relationship that God wants to have with us.
It makes me think of a story that'll make you laugh. So I hadn't been in the church for a while, and there's a church in Santa Monica called St. Monica's. My mother's name was Monica, so Monica is very important to me, right? And I haven't been in the church for a while, and I went there, and this is a few years ago, and I go in, and the priest comes out, and it's almost like one of those setups, and he does this thing where he says, You're there, you're not sure you should be here. You should be here. You haven't been here for a long time, but we want you here. And you may be questioning yourself about why you're here. No, you're meant to be here. We've been waiting for you. And it goes on and on and on. And it talks about St. Monica. Of course, I then become this complete wreck, and I'm kind of crying my eyes out, sitting there. And I'm like, and I'm in the church, and quietly, and all the rest of the people, and I'm, doing that. the really loud noise, and I'm thinking, these people must think I'm a complete fruitcake. And then the song, the first hymn is sung, and the hymn is something like, come back, and I'm thinking, this is just, there's cameras somewhere here. This is extraordinary. So I was a bit of the prodigal son myself.
Yeah, you can call yourself a convert too, right? If that's that's what and I think conversion is every day. Every day, if we're really in a search for truth, we're going to fall to some sort of beautiful truth. If we're in the pursuit of it every day, we will. And you're so right. You're the evangelist for art. And I'm very grateful for that.
I'm going to finish today with just reminding, I want to just tell people about how you and I met, because I really love that story. I hope I'm going to have no problem getting through telling the story without becoming a mess, because I often tell people this story and I have difficulties telling it. So when we started doing the Gosnell movie, and I was doing a lot of this research, reading what the grand jury had heard, reading the transcripts from the trial, speaking to people who had been in the clinic, people who had grandmothers who had lost grandchildren and found out that the feet in the jars were the feet of a grandchild that a woman had lost. And one of the rewards for giving money to the Gosnell movie was $10,000, and I would come to where you were and give a speech. And a very kind lady, that a friend of ours in North Carolina, was one of those people, and she arranged a little event. And she had, Rick Santorum was there, right? And, but very small little event, like 20 people. And you were there, and I kind of gave a speech with all this raw knowledge that I had just acquired about what abortion was and what had happened to these children, and about baby boy A and how important his life was and how he could change the whole world. And I was raw, and you came up immediately afterwards and sort of said, I'm going to pray for you. And I was like, and we just had that. I don't know what happened, you and I, but I just loved you from the first time I ever met you. I was like, just a beautiful thing. And you were running off as usual, jumping on a plane, and you ran off, and I think you must have we must have exchanged telephone numbers. And as you got on the plane, and I don't know if you remember this, you texted me and said that you had been in touch with the prayer warriors, said your group of prayer warriors, and that you had them praying for me. And I wrote back and I said to you, I felt it. And I did, and we have been friends, obviously through the Gosnell movie, but we'll be friends forever. I'm sorry to tell you that you're not going to get rid of me that easily.
It's one of the blessings of my life. I can feel that. Look, when you communicate with the ability that you do, you're completely transparent, which has probably plagued you, right? And so it was so, I knew that my life was going to be different after that point. I couldn't, in a new way, I knew that this was from such evil, and that there is no faltering. There's no faltering, and I if you don't mind me saying this, but on here, but it was so obvious the enemy trying to weasel his way in, which he will in moments like this. It reminded me so much of The Exorcist that I called my friend whose husband wrote it. You don't even know this.
No.
This is who I called. And that she's on a team of people that pray, and she knows what that is, and she knows that when you get that close to evil, that you have to be surrounded by love and prayer. So she gets it.
We're going to talk again, Marjorie. I want to do this again. This has been so great.
Next time, wine.
Next time, wine, and I think this cook-off is a thing that our people need to talk to our people.
Now, what do you pair with meatloaf?
Oh, I would put a very big red in there. I would put a big full-bodied red in there is what I would do with that. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
All right, that sounds fantastic.
Thanks so much, Martin. If you're listening to this podcast and you're not...
we have the book there.
And we have the book there. Oh, actually, that's another thing, and I meant to say that, and I wrote to Marjorie. This is the book, and by the way, look at all my marks here, because I just love the book so much. You can get this book everywhere you get books online right now, so there's an e-version of it, and it's also on Amazon, so I'd highly recommend it. It is incredible. It's really a testimony, actually, I think, also to Marjorie's ability to deal with all these politicians who are extremely disappointing. So many of them who were extremely disappointing, who made pledges to her and then decided to change their mind. But the other thing I was going to say was that at the very end of the podcast, she mentions this beautiful painting, The Prodigal Son by Rembrandt. And if you are listening on the podcast, it's really worth going online and looking up that painting. Very, very beautiful. And it's interesting that it's The Prodigal Son, because I just remembered that Philip and I were over with our very dear friends, shout out to the Armenians over there, our Armenian friends, who we had this huge conversation about The Prodigal Son, because they've had an argument about it, right?
Somebody has a difficulty.
One of them, the wife, and we won't call out names or anything, but the wife is very unhappy with the Prodigal Son story, and the husband thinks it's great. But obviously it's a very provocative story because people feel sorry for the good brother, the good guy who stayed at home and whatever, and then the big party is organised. And,
right.
Anyway, Sarah, we're coming to the end of the show. But we can't end the show, however, without going to Phelan's dessert. So the other day, this started about a week ago, Phelan started acting very mysteriously and asking me about, do we have flour, in the house? Do we have sugar, really odd. And I was saying yes, whatever. And then he decided that he had this dessert he had read about. Tell us more, Phelan.
Of course, I'm standing here without the menu, without the recipe.
Don't worry about the recipe, because I can help people with the recipe, and the recipe will be up in the show notes.
Right. So I'm going to try and remember what I was doing. So
flour. So Phelan, you had
flour
and butter. You started with the flour and the butter.
Yes.
And you can see this now. We're going to go and look at these pictures, so you can see Phelan mixing the flour and the butter.
Yes. How much flour?
And I think we had a cup of flour.
Yes.
And I think we had
125 grams of butter.
About 125 grams.
And you
butter.
mix it up, and you try and get it as crumbly as possible.
Make it look like breadcrumbs.
Yes. Then
you added oats,
sugar, and the secret.
Oh, the secret ingredient.
Chopped up hazelnuts. Get the knife.
So Phelan got the knife out. You can see Phelan on the knife out. We had an argument about this because I don't think doing that on a flat surface is great because the nuts start to roll away. But anyway, he chop. We throw that all in and create a crumble. Yes. And then what was the fruit?
Oh, the fruit. Then my first time using the apple corer.
So we realised we had an apple corer, and do you know what? Are they good or not?
They are. They're pretty good.
They're pretty good because you really need to core the apple.
Yeah.
Push. Oh, it's come in at the wrong angle.
So apple cores, blueberries, don't forget to wash them, put them down, lay them down.
Just correct that again now there. They're not, they're blackberries.
You know.
And by the way, can I just say...
Blackberries, blueberries, that's what, it shows I'm colourblind.
Blackberries are absolutely fabulous. Gorgeous, gorgeous. Anyway, none of the fruit needs to be stewed in advance, by the way, which I think is a huge benefit. Mm-hmm. Then you just spread the crumble on top. Listen to me tell your story. Tell your
spread
story.
The crumble on top. I was slightly unhappy with how crumbly it was. I think what happened was, you throw water in at the end.
This is also a secret film.
I think I put in too much water and it bound up too much. I was slightly unhappy with. I'd like it to be very sparing with the water, very sparing.
Like a tablespoon of water.
I put in too much, and then spread it on top of the fruit. And cinnamon! Don't forget the cinnamon.
Oh, don't forget the cinnamon. Yeah, like a little bit of like a shake of cinnamon, not a huge amount because you don't want it to over dominate. Yes. And then
spread it over, and then a little cheat. I felt there was a few gaps, and so I just sprinkled a little bit of granola.
And do that if you feel like you haven't covered the surface. It's a great cheat at the last minute.
Yeah.
And then we had the oven heated to 350, and you put it in there for how long, Phil?
40 minutes.
And can I just say, so this has been cooked twice already since Phelan discovered this, and you can see the finished product, and I'm actually showing the finished product that we used, the most recent one, and then the one we used after that. There's two versions of it there, you can see. Absolutely total winner, by the way, total winner. And it's interesting, so hazelnuts are meant for blackberries in the same way that you have your almonds are made for rhubarb. Unbelievable. Thank you for that. God, gorgeous. And by the way, can I just say, after we record this, you know what we're going to do? I'm going to make lunch and we're going to have that dessert again. You can serve it with whipped cream and vanilla ice cream.
We need to tell people the recipe for whipped cream.
That's Phelan's joke against people, a number of Americans that have come to our house who seem to have a talk about what's the recipe for whipped cream?
They're disabled, Dan.
And it's it's kind of a weird thing. No, I don't know what it is, but basically there is no.
You get cream
in Ireland. In Ireland, whipped cream is exactly what it sounds like. It's cream, whipped. Okay, we're going to stop right now.
No, I want to keep going, but
we're going to stop.
Okay.
So just remember, everyone, thank you so much for everything. Thank you for your comments. And by the way, please leave a comment if you can, because we've had a few trolls around and they cause all kinds of difficulties to our star rating. Yeah. And please don't forget to donate if you can to Obamagate the Movie. Obamagatemovie.com. Obamagatemovie.com. We are a 501c3, so all your donations, if you're in the United States of America, are tax deductible. And that's it for this week. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.